En el centro de la pampa vive un pimiento. Sol y viento pa' su vida, sol y viento. Sol y viento pa' su vida, sol y viento.
Bonjour, Patrick Bernard ici, bienvenue à la 79e édition du Pimento. Ici, on est à Ottawa, c'est le Forum Social des Peuples. Hello, I'm Patrick Barnard. Welcome to the 79th edition of the Pimento Report. It's the 21st of August, 2014, and we are here now at the People's Social Forum, at the Social Forum of Peoples here in Ottawa, Canada.
And let's have another victory cry on three. 1, 2, 3, let's hear it! Wow, you're doing really good now, folks.
Je suis ici comme participant au Forum Social des Peuples. C'est quoi ce forum? C'est une convergence de toutes sortes de groupes du Québec et du Canada et d'ailleurs, des gens qui cherchent une alternative à notre monde actuel. Alors, cette vidéo sera en anglais justement à cause de la langue des participants et les deux prochaines, mais la quatrième vidéo ici à Ottawa sera complètement en français. So this video is going to be in English because of the language of the participants, the next two as well, but our last and longest Pimento report will be completely in French. So, in order to begin our look at the People's Social Forum, we're going to hear an explanation, kind of background, from Montreal writer, activist, editor, publisher Dimitri Roussoupoulos. He happens to be Noam Chomsky's publisher in Canada. Dimitri is going to tell us about the framework of this particular forum, the first of its kind in Canada. And then we're going to hear from the writer and activist Naomi Klein, and in her speech she is going to talk about what people are describing here as the culture of extraction that is found not just in Canada and the Western world, but now globally. Can you tell me a little bit about the history of social forums?
Well, the idea, actually, the kernel of the idea started in the Seattle battle against the World Trade Organization, where the protesters shut down the meeting and the hoi polloi of that organization had to pack it in and go home. And so then a number of meetings took place in Europe where people said, well, what can we do in addition to protests? And from that idea and discussion, what happened is that Le Monde Diplomatique, people in Latin America, especially in Brazil, took up the challenge and organized the first social forum in 2001, where there were some 10,000 people who came for the first time. And the idea was to counterpose the World Social Forum with the World Economic Forum that takes place every year in Davos, Switzerland, where the heads of major multinational corporations, big bureaucrats, prime ministers from all over the world meet in order to strategize what they would like to do in terms of directions for the world economy. So
I remember you going to the one in 2001, am I right?
Exactly, and it cost a penny to go there. And so I had to raise the money, and I remember asking around, should I go, should I not go, and I get this letter or this telephone call from Chomsky and said, Dimitri, you have to go, it would be a very important thing for you to do. So I went. And it was very interesting because I've gone to a lot of international meetings, and this was the first one where I opened up the program, Patrick, and I see local problems tied up with regional problems tied up with global problems, and back again down to the local level. So there was an attempt to integrate all the important issues that we face, and not just to talk about one thing way up there or one thing way out there. There is a representative here, Gustave Massia of the International Council of the World Social Forum, and there's a workshop this afternoon or tomorrow on the World Social Forum. So our social forum which is the first pan-Canadian social forum that has taken place. A very unique event in Canadian history, bringing together First Nations people, Francophone Quebecers, and other Anglophone Quebecers from across country. It's the first time this ever happened. People are actually speaking to each other and building towards the future.
I think we need the audience to participate too. We know you guys can do it. Audience on three, I want you to join in with the dancers. And let's hear a victory cry. On three. 1, 2, 3. All right, we have some dancers here today.
Donc je le disais, c'est un honneur, pour moi c'est un plaisir de vous introduire à cette première grande conférence du Forum social des peuples. Ladies and gentlemen, she is an award-winning journalist and a prolific author of international bestsellers. Her new book, This Changes Everything, Capitalism versus the Climate, will be published in September 2014. Please welcome Naomi Klein.
I don't think there is a direct analogy for what we're seeing here and what we will see here over the next few days. But I've been thinking about Quebec City in April 2001, really as the last time I remember. I think there are some veterans of that moment here. A time when our different sectors came together against a common enemy and to advance a shared agenda. That's when Canada's social movements helped lead a continent-wide mobilization to stop the proposed free trade area of the Americas. And we didn't just come together, we came together and we won. The FTAA died, never to be revived, and it is a testament of the power of these kinds of convergences. But a few months later, in the anti-activist chill post 9/11, that movement died. Not our individual movements. They, for the most part, remained intact. Some of them expanded. But that coming together broke apart. That movement of movements, as we called it at the time. And many of us went back, some of us fearfully, into our respective silos. Now, that breakup happened for many reasons. That's part of what I explored in my last book, in The Shock Doctrine, about how moments of crisis, of shock, make us lose our story, our narrative. And in large part, that book was driven by that experience of being part of a movement that was kind of shocked out of existence before its time. The reason I think it's worth looking back is not out of some nostalgia, because that movement was far from perfect, and I think already this convergence is getting things right that we didn't get right. I think that the leadership of First Nations people that has been, and the respect that has been a huge part of organizing this summit and the success of this convergence is something we didn't do as well in 2001. That we did do right back then is that we weren't talking about the personalities of individual politicians or the marginal differences. And one of the things that's been happening over particularly the past 5 years is that we find ourselves in the midst of an extraction frenzy in this country, particularly around fossil fuels, but not exclusively around fossil fuels. And we see this obviously with the tar sands, with fracking. We see it in large-scale mining projects, mining disasters, although as my friend Harsha Walia pointed out recently, mining is a disaster, certainly at that scale. We see it in that metal monster of pipelines stretching towards us in all directions, Northern Gateway, Kinder Morgan, Energy East, Line 9. And just as the virtual tentacles of those trade deals brought us together before, now the very real tentacles of this extraction infrastructure is bringing us together. This infrastructure of death bringing us together to defend life and building new coalitions to do that. And once again, I think we have to be clear. Ultimately, this is not about stopping individual pipelines or an individual mine. It's not even about stopping the tar sands. It's about the logic fueling all of it. The logic that sacrifices life on the altar of money. And this is the same logic that our social movements who are focused on fighting poverty, fighting for housing rights, for healthcare rights, for education rights, are also fighting that fundamental battle between life, profit, life, and money. A system that would sacrifice the lives of certain people because they're deemed less valuable. This is the logic at play in the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women. It's the logic that we see at play right now in Ferguson with the sacrificing of young African American lives. And I think it is the same logic that treats certain people as fundamentally disposable that is at the heart of the extractive economy, that declares certain areas to be acceptable sacrifice zones in the name of turning Canada into an energy superpower. It's a supremacist logic. It's a supremacist logic that divides the world relentlessly into somebodies and nobodies, into somewheres and nowheres, or worst of all, the middle of nowheres. This is a logic that founded this country we call Canada. It is embedded so deeply in the logic of colonialism, which was always based on the myth of nobodies and nowheres and sacrifice zones. And it is this logic, I believe, fundamentally that we must name and that we must build a movement to counter. Because we are living in a historic time where what we do in the next 10 years determines the fates for generations to come. Because we're not just living in a moment where it's only a river, a mountain, a watershed, a culture, a species being sacrificed in the name of economic growth. It's all this and more. It's the stability of all of Earth's systems that support life. Friends, we are up against a psychotic logic that has profoundly confused destruction with creation. And that is what we have to change. Not just by saying no to Harper's worst ideas, though we have to do that, but by proposing and demonstrating real alternatives, relationships to the land and relationships with one another that are not based on creating ever larger sacrifice zones, but on protecting and regenerating life in everything that we do.